Okay, so here we are today. We're starting the first class of 2026. And Geshe, I would like to say that you are all actually very, very fortunate because you have this incredible opportunity to receive so many teachings from Rinpoche and great Geshes and so forth. And by doing this and facilitating and participating in these events, you accumulate a lot of merit. Now, when we talk about the accumulation of merit, we should not expect that immediately, straight away, because we accumulated merit, the qualities will just leap out and manifest and become evident. It's not like this. However, with the accumulation of merit, and depending on how much faith you have, just merely by hearing the words of the teachings, you can place very good imprints in your mind. So we talk about having the great opportunity or the great fortune for all those things, but whether or not it is great fortune and great opportunity, it is something that we must make it as such. Like we seek it, we establish it, we recognize it as such. So it shouldn't be the case that we come and attend the teachings because other people say, oh, you should come and attend. There is such a great teaching, and I attended that great teaching, and so forth. Because this type of talking actually becomes a cause of pride. Now, we are people who have faith in past and previous lives. We have faith in the three jewels. We have faith in the law of cause and effect. We have been exposed to the Mahayana. We know the paths that are shared with the individuals of the small scope and the middle scope. And the fact that our spiritual teachers have introduced all these topics to us, this is actually the great fortune, the great opportunity that we have. Otherwise, people sometimes they say, oh, I'm very fortunate because I have material wealth, I have money, I have this and that. Of course, it's very good to have those things, and it is fortune to possess those things. But those things, although they might make you happy for the time being, they are not the ultimate fortune, and they're not the ultimate cause of our happiness. Often they turn into causes for suffering. So Geshe said I jumped straight away into the explanation. I should have said, welcome everyone to the first class of 2026. So for this first class of 2026, the subject matter will be lojong, mind training. So when we talk about mind training here, in terms of the Buddha Dharma, here we're saying that ultimately the aim is to obtain the state of omniscience. And to be able to do that, we have to make sure that our mind has become a virtuous mind, a good mind, it's a stable mind, and so forth. And we achieve this through trainings of, let's say, the Lamrim or lojong training and so forth. So we use these different terms. So in terms of this root training of in mind training, in this area of mind training, we know that we have a number of texts, such as the 8-point mind training, the 8 verses of mind training, the 7-point mind training right, like the rays of the sun, the wheel of sharp weapons. All of those texts are texts on mind training. Now, we have chosen to follow the, as our reference text, the mind training like the rays of the sun. It's quite an extensive text. It's not short, and we don't have much time. So anyway, in any case, we will be following the presentation according to Geshe Chekawa. So we say that we're following this lojong mind training of Geshe Chekawa. So the author, Geshe Chekawa, is someone who has been able to pull the essence of instruction from the 84,000 bundles of teachings and condense it and present it in a clear and precise way to us that is very beneficial at these degenerative times. So where we need like clear and concise presentation. Okay, so here we're talking about mind training. Lojong refers to mind training. So we are referring to the mind that exists within our own continuum. We're not referring to anything external, like anything in the environment, the mountains and things like that. Those things are not sentient. So we're talking about the mind that we have within our continuum. Okay, so we have explained that the first term in mind training, which is mind, right, it refers to our awareness. And the second one is the part of training. So here, when we talk about mind training, we're not talking about training awareness to perceive specific objects. So we know that our 5 types of awareness, such as eye awareness, ear awareness, nose awareness, and so forth, they operate continuously. And each one of those types of awarenesses or minds comprehends a particular object. So the eye awareness will comprehend forms and so forth. So when we talk about mind training, we are not talking about training the eye consciousness to engage a particular form or color or anything like this. So, what we're referring to is that in the course of a day, 24 hours, we generate many different types of mind. Some are good, positive, and some are bad, negative. And we need to be able to shift through these different types of mind. Mm. So, this mind that is included in the term mind training is something that we have it. So, first of all, we need to recognize that we have mind. All right. Then the second question is, if we examine and we analyze, does this mind exist? And we say, no, it does not exist. However, conventionally, it does exist. Mm. Okay, so we have a mind, and here we're talking about mind training. So, what we want to do is to generate and increase as much as possible virtues or positive states of mind. I mean, this is why we come to the center to study and train so that we can improve our mind. So, this is one understanding of the term training: generate and increase your virtuous thoughts. The other one is recognizing that there are many faults in your mind as well, to be able to remove and purify those. Okay, so in this particular context, when we talk about mind training, we are talking about training in the method of equalizing and exchanging self for others, which is one of the methods for generating bodhicitta. And it is very clear that the one thing that we want to eliminate and remove here is our self-cherishing. As Geshe himself says, put the blame on one thing alone. And that one thing we need to blame is our self-cherishing. So we're talking about the method, the basic, the root thing with training is, which is equalizing and exchanging self for others. We can find instructions for those things in the paths that are shared with the small scope, the middle scope, and especially the great scope. Within the Mahayana, we have a lot of instruction about equalizing and exchanging self for others, which is a method very suitable for those Mahayana practitioners of sharp faculties. So they are able to train in these methods of equalizing and then exchanging, which is really comes down to the method of Tonglen. Sorry. So to talk a little bit about the lineage of instructions that we have from India, obviously, we have the lineage of the profound view. We have the lineage of the extensive deeds, in which we find all this information of the 7-point mind training and so of Geshe and so forth. And we also have the lineage of the blessed practice. So here we need to talk a bit about the origin of this lineage of that Geshe Chekawa has. Mm. So We have different lines of transmission of different instructions. First of all, from Buddha Shakyamuni down to Protector Maitreya, from Maitreya to Master Asanga, and from Master Asanga eventually the lineage of the sevenfold cause and effect method for generating bodhicitta. Then we have another transmission of instructions that goes from Buddha Shakyamuni to Venerable Manjushri, from Manjushri to Nagarjuna, from Nagarjuna to Chandrakirti, and so forth. And this is the lineage of the profound view that, again, can promote the generation of the mind training. And finally, we have the third lineage that comes from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri, and from Manjushri directly to Shantideva, and from Shantideva it goes down to Master Serlimpa. From Master Serlimpa it goes down to Master Atisha, and so on and so forth. So actually we have many names of great scholars and practitioners in those lineages. We're just giving some names, reference. Okay, so here the 7-point mind training, the instructions for 7-point mind training are the ones that we receive from the lineage of the blessed practice. And it comes, as we say, from Manjushri to Shantideva to Serlimpa, from Serlimpa to Atisha. This is where it comes. And this is a type of training for individuals of sharp faculties. In general, the other method, which is the sevenfold cause and effect method, it's a method for generating bodhicitta that is suitable both for those who have dull faculties and also those who have sharp faculties. But the other two methods, the method that comes from the lineage of the profound view and the lineage of the blessed practice, are only for individuals of sharp faculties. So we're looking here at the lineage that came down from Master Atisha, and it's a lineage, there are instructions of equalizing and exchanging self for others. And actually, these instructions were available in India at the time of Atisha. When Atisha was at Nalanda Monastery, they were already, great masters from whom he could have received these instructions. And also remember that Master Atisha had visions of Tara, and he could have asked directly Tara to give him the instructions. However, he chose to travel to Indonesia to meet Lama Serlimpa. So he was on a boat for many months with great difficulty to arrive to Indonesia and receive there the transmission from Lama Serlimpa of the 7-point mind training and also the lineage of the profound view and so forth. He received many instructions. So, of course, the question might naturally arise, why did Master Atisha chose to travel all the way to Indonesia to find Lama Serlimpa to receive this advice? Because, as we said at that time, these instructions were available in India. And when Master Atisha was at Nalanda, he relied on so many fully qualified teachers, realized teachers, and so forth. So he could have received the instructions from them. So what is it that made him undertake the journey, which was so difficult back then, to go and receive the instructions specifically from Lama Serlimpa? The answer to that is there was a very strong karmic connection from previous lives, many previous lives, between Master Atisha and Lama Serlimpa. And this is what made Master Atisha overtake the journey and seek to receive the instructions from Lama Serlimpa and not from any other great teacher in India. And we see that theme playing out in many such relationships between student and teacher. For example, Milarepa relied on Marpa, and he received so many punishments and hardships from Marpa. But as a result of that, because they had a very special karmic connection from their previous lives, he reached a state of Buddhahood in that particular life. So we can see this happening. So, for example, in Tibet, we have Chenrezig. In China, we have Opak Meng, and so forth. So there are specific karmic connections. So let's explain here how the lineage or how those teachings arrived at Tibet. So once Lama Atisha received all instructions from Lama Serlimpa, he returned to India. So obviously from there, the full instructions were established in India. But then Tara advised Master Atisha that he should go to Tibet and prophesied to him that there he would have a special disciple. And indeed, Master Atisha went to Tibet, where he met with his special disciple, Dro-Phen, who was a manifestation of Chenrezig. He passed on the entire lineage to Dro-Phen, and Dro-Phen passed on this lineage to what is known the three Kadampa brothers. So these refer to Geshe Potowa, Geshe Chengawa, Geshe Puchunwa. And then Geshe Potowa passed this lineage to Geshe Langri Tampa and Geshe Sharawa. And then we're talking about, we will be studying the text by Geshe Chekawa. So Geshe Chekawa was a student of Geshe Sharawa. Okay, so it's very important, we're talking about the lineage here, it's very important to understand the great blessing that comes, because all this lineage begins or is traced back to Buddha Shakyamuni himself. And then we see how the different lineages reach all the way, let's say to this author, to Geshe Chekawa. Okay, so let's see here now how Geshe Chekawa came to the point of receiving these instructions. So Geshe Chekawa was born in a family that were following the Nyima tradition. So he was educated according to the Nyima tradition. However, he came across instructions that said, in order to obtain the state of enlightenment, it's very important that you work for the benefit of others, that you benefit others as much as possible. And this was an instruction that really moved him. And as he was contemplating the importance of this, he happened to come across a couple of lines from the 8 verses of Geshe Langri Tampa. So he just came across these lines. He didn't see the entire text. And these were the lines that says, I take upon myself defeat and give the victory to others. And this struck him as an extremely important advice or instruction. And he thought that this would be, if I could implement this would really go a long way towards benefiting others. But he wanted to find the author of this text, of this instruction. So, as I say, the 8 verses of mind training were composed by Geshe Langri Tampa. Geshe Langri Tampa was an incredible Mahayana practitioner, and we can see from an incident that occurred in his life how he actually put into practice exactly this instruction of taking on let's say, the defeat and offering the victory to others. One day, Geshe Langri Tampa was teaching. So Geshe Langri Tampa was a monk, right? Ordained monks. He was sitting on the throne and he was teaching to the other monks. And a lady enters into the assembly carrying a small child. The child maybe was 1 year, 2 years old, no older than this. And she walks up straight up to Geshe Langri and places the child on his lap and says, "This is your child. Now you take care of it." So you can imagine what was the reaction of the audience. They were all ordained monks, and they started thinking, "What is this? What is happening?" Geshe Langri did not argue, saying, "Who are you? I don't know you. This is not my child," right? He didn't argue. He didn't say anything. He just took the child on his lap, indeed, and kept the child. So, of course, you can imagine what the other monks were thinking about him. But he didn't say anything. He just kept the child. He raised the child with great affection, educated the child, trained the child, as if it was his own child, biological child. And then, many, many years later, the mother comes back and says, "I demand you give me back my child." And again, without any objection, without any arguments, he just handed back the child to her. So you can see it's a clear demonstration of taking on the defeat and offering the victory to others. He didn't argue, he didn't say anything. Now, to understand what was happening here in this situation, this lady had given birth to many children, and for some reason, those children were sick and did not survive beyond the age of 1 or 2 years. So after a while, she consulted someone who didn't know, and the person said, "If you actually offer your next child to a lama, then the lama will keep the child, and the child will survive, will grow up to be a grown-up person." And therefore, guided by this instruction, she took the child and gave it to Geshe Langri Tangpa. So, as I say here, Geshe Tekawa, having found these two lines of Geshe Langri Tangpa's text, he decided to travel and try to find Geshe Langri Tangpa. He wanted to meet Geshe Langri Tangpa and receive instructions from him. So he traveled to where he thought Langri Tangpa would be, asking along the way, where can I find the author of these texts? Where can I find the author of these texts? But by the time he arrived, Geshe Langri Tangpa had already passed away. And some other great scholars said, "Look, it's not possible. He's passed away. However, you can meet Geshe Sharawa." So now Geshe Tekawa actually goes to the place where Geshe Sharawa is giving teachings. When he arrived, Geshe Sharawa was giving teachings to a large number of students, 100, 200 students, and he was teaching on Master Asanga's The Bodhisattva Grounds. So when he arrived, Geshe Tekawa, he remained at the teachings, so he listened, and he remained for a few months examining Geshe Sharawa. So he did not immediately, let's say blindly accept Geshe Sharawa as his teacher, but rather he remained there to see what type of teacher is he? Does he have realizations? What qualities does he have? What type of teachings is he giving? So he remained for a few months examining the teacher, whether to decide for himself whether that was an appropriate teacher for him or not, which is a very good thing, a very good point to take to heart, because we see these days people just rush into these decisions without examining, without knowing the Lama, without knowing the qualities or the teaching style of the Lama. And immediately they say, "This is my teacher," or "This is my Lama, I will rely upon this teacher." And then very quickly they fall out of favor with this particular Lama, which is a very bad thing to do. So, take heed of this behavior that Geshe Tekawa illustrated. He checked Geshe Sharawa for many months. So we see that actually Geshe Tekawa went to many of the teachings of Geshe Sharawa to check out, what was he teaching. And although he was not teaching what he was searching for, because he was looking for instructions on this particular verse. I take on the defeat, I give the victory to others. But Geshe Sarawa was teaching on the Bodhisattva grounds. And all these teachings that were going on for months did not satisfy the need of Geshe Chikawa. It was not what Geshe Chikawa was looking for. So, as a result, Geshe Chikawa developed doubt in his mind and was thinking, I wonder if this teacher actually has these instructions I'm looking for or not. So after a while, he decided, I will ask him straight out. So one day, Geshe Sarawa was circumambulating a stupa, and Geshe Chikawa was waiting for him there in the path. And he said, please, take a seat. I would like to ask you a question. And he decided, I will ask him straight away. And Geshe Sarawa said, yeah, what is it that you want to know? And Geshe Chikawa said, I have come across this line that says, take on defeat and give on yourself and give the victory to others. And in your opinion, by relying on this type of instruction, and will I be able to generate bodhicitta, and will I be able to reach the state of Buddhahood on the basis of this instruction? And Geshe Sarawa replied, if you're not interested about reaching the state of Buddhahood, you can, set aside this instruction. It won't be important for you. But if you are interested in reaching the state of Buddhahood, exactly this instruction is indispensable, because it's actually, this line is teaching the core practice of exchanging oneself and others, of exchanging this attitude of cherishing oneself and instead developing the attitude of cherishing others. Okay, so by hearing this answer, Geshe Chikawa immediately realized that Geshe Sarawa has the instruction and is actually very fully qualified to teach it, and he has realizations on this. So immediately he decided, okay, I will request these instructions from him. But then he had a second question. He said, what is the scriptural origin of this instruction? Where does it come from? And he said, you can look in Master Nagarjuna's The Garland of Advice to the King, and you will find the verses there. Actually, we have a number of texts where if you know what you're looking for, you will recognize these particular instructions, origins. Yeah. And of course, we have these instructions in Bodhisattva's Ways of Life by Master Shantideva. Okay, so then as a result of that being satisfied now, Geshe Chikawa remained with Geshe Sarawa and studied with him for 14 years, as a result of which he developed bodhicitta in a stainless manner by relying on this method of equalizing and exchanging self for others. So this is also very important to pay attention to, that he studied for 14 years, which is a long time, because these days there is let's say there is the pressure or there is the attitude that we want to see results immediately. And we ask the teachers for a quick and very effective teaching. We want to see the results straight away, but it doesn't work like this. And when we talk about seeing, let's say, progress in terms of our happiness and our well-being, on an everyday life, if you're able to reduce afflictions and negative states of mind, if you can see this type of progress, then you can say that to that degree, your happiness has increased. So we see that up to the point of Geshe Chekawa, these instructions were very precious, and also, as we say, they were only suitable to be practiced by individuals who have very sharp faculties, and therefore they were not public instructions. They were not given openly to large audience. They were secret Dharma instructions that were passed from one individual to the next as oral, restricted, secret teachings. However, when Geshe Chikawa received these teachings, he felt very strongly that if they were to remain secret, eventually the lineage would decline and the instructions will be lost. And for that reason, he composed the text and organized the text that we now know as the 7-point mind training. Okay, so as we say, Geshe Chikawa composed the text, but we see that the text is organized under 7 headings. And probably it was not Geshe Chikawa who put the 7 headings, and it seems that another great scholar and student, Se Chilpu, was the one who probably, we're not 100% sure, inserted those headings. The other element with these texts is that although it's not a very long text, we find that there are a few variations of the verses of this verse. So there are, you might find different variations of it. As we see here with these texts, the 7-point mind training is a text that is short and it's organized in a way that makes it easy for us to put it into practice. Now, there are some individuals who are actually able to engage the great classical texts that are very extensive. If you are someone who has the time and the mental capacity to do that, this is excellent. But for most people during these days, it's more appropriate to rely on a shorter text, such as, for example, the 8 verses transformation, mind transformation, or the 7-point mind training. These are short texts, very applicable, very suitable for us. And because of the features of these texts, that is like not very lengthy, few words, very vast meaning, very profound, very beneficial, and so forth, we find that this lojong text is something that we can find across all the schools of Buddhism. So Sakya, Nyingma, Kagyu, Geluk, they all have this, although we might have differences across the schools in other types of practices. Although, for example, if you look at the Sakya tradition, they have lamrim, they have presentation of tantra, secret tantra, and so forth. Anyway, the thing is that the mind training, the 7-point mind training, is universally, used and relied upon. Yes. And especially in the Gelug tradition and the Sakya tradition, the mind training is very strong. It has a very strong tradition. We're not saying that it is missing from the other schools, but in these 2 schools, it's very predominant. Okay, so we're going to begin now with the presentation of the 7-point mind training, which, as we say, it's organized under 7 headings. Okay, so we see that in the beginning we have some preliminaries. And these preliminaries, first of all, is considering the characteristics of the precious human rebirth. The second one is death and impermanence. The third one is the law of cause and effect. And the fourth one is the shortcomings of samsara. So these subjects actually are very, very similar to the lamrim. So first of all, precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, law of cause and effect are subjects that appear in the lamrim presentation under the paths that are shared with the individual of the small scope, and they appear in this order. Then, In the Lamrim, the next subject that follows after the law of cause and effect is taking refuge to the three jewels. But here in the mind training, after the presentation of the law of cause and effect, we have presentation of the faults of samsara. So this is the difference between in terms of these preliminary practices. So the faults of samsara fall under the training that is common with the individual of the middle scope in the Lamrim. So the first of the preliminaries is first train in the preliminary practices. So these are the preliminary practices we are training in. And we see that these are also in line with the presentation of that we have in the three principal aspects of the path. Okay. All right. So we say that in terms of the preliminaries, the fourth one is considering the faults of samsara. As we say, this is a subject that is included within the paths that are shared with the individual of the middle scope in the Lamrim. And if you are looking at a more extensive Lamrim text, there you will find the presentation of the Four Noble Truths and also the 12 links of dependent origination. So the first of the 7 points is the preliminaries. Then from the second point, we begin with the main practice, which is training in the two types of bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Then we come into number 3, which is transforming adversity into the path that leads to enlightenment. Very important point. Number 4, presenting in summary the practice in one's lifetime. Number 5 is the measure of having trained your mind, because here we're talking about mind training. So, of course, the question arises, when can I say that I have sufficiently trained my mind? Then we have number 6. The 6th outline is the commitments of mind training. So commitments of mind training is the things that we will be doing, we are encouraged to doing. We have a list of 16 of those. And then in the 7th outline, we have advice for training the mind that gives advice about things that we should stop doing. And there are 22 of those. Okay, so what we covered up to here was explaining the lineage of these instructions. So we say that the lineage, of course, stems back from Buddha Shakyamuni. And because this is the origin of this lineage, it is the lineage that carries great blessing. The lineage has remained to our days in an uninterrupted manner. And this is very important because it means that if we engage in the practice of that comes from such a lineage, then the blessings will enter within us. We will be affected by these blessings. And Geshe was saying, I have received, I know I have received teachings and commentaries on the 7-point mind training in relation to the text that is called the mind training like the rays of the sun from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So he said I was double checking with other monks, and we certainly received in a few occasions. Okay, so we begin and we see that actually the first line in the text is a line of homage because it says, I prostrate to great compassion. So usually when the authors begin the composition of a text, you always find a line of homage, and it can vary the expression of homage. So in some texts it says, I prostrate to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. In this case, we have I prostrate to great compassion. And this is very important because really, if you want to bring about the benefit of sentient beings in a vast, big scale, you absolutely need to develop love, compassion, bodhicitta. So great compassion is indispensable for this. And this is why the Geshe Chikawa begins by saying homage to the great compassion. So after the line of homage, it says, the essence of this nectar of secret instruction is transmitted from the master from Sumatra. So we have here the nectar of this instruction. So the nectar refers, which is known in Sanskrit as Amrita, refers to the nectar of immortality. So this is the nectar that gives you the deathless state. The deathless state here is understood as the state of Buddhahood. So here we have the essence of the nectar. So the essence of the nectar refers to bodhichitta itself. So through training on the method of equalizing and exchanging self for others, we generate the mind of bodhicitta that is the essence of the nectar of this great instruction. And all of this instruction is transmitted from Master Selimpa. We know from Master Selimpa it went to Master Atisha, and from there we have the whole lineage. This is how Geshe Chekawa received these instructions. Okay, so the nectar here, just to be clear, it does not refer to any food or drink or anything like that. It is the nectar of immortality, and the essence of this is bodhicitta. Okay, so very important here is to understand how we can incorporate this in our practice, everyday practice. So in the period of 24 days, how do we practice? So Geshe was saying, okay, so when we talk about practice, we say you begin the practice by doing the preliminaries such as, for example, going for refuge, making prostrations, organizing the offerings in your altar, reciting the 100-syllable mantras, and so forth. In general, these are preliminaries, but these are not the preliminaries that we need to understand here. Here, preliminaries refer to having obtained the physical basis of the precious human rebirth. So we need to consider, I have come in this life, and definitely I have obtained this precious human rebirth. It is precious human rebirth, but it doesn't mean our lives are completely free from any problem or suffering. Of course, we have taken rebirth through the power of karma and afflictions, and therefore occasionally we will be sick, we will have some problem, some difficulty. But if we really examine our situation, we do not have severe suffering. We do not have extreme illness. And actually, most of the time, everything functions well and we are happy. We have happiness in our lives. So we must ask the question, where do these things come from? One might say that these things come from external wealth, material wealth. And of course, wealth and power can minimize the amount of discomfort and problems that you face in your life. But if we're talking about precious human rebirth, we have to understand that this depends on the merit that we accumulated in our past lives. And this comes here as a result now. So when we talk about mind training here, definitely we talk about a practice that will allow us to exercise patience and avoid anger when we encounter a difficult situation. So let's say when someone harms you, instead of becoming angry and expressing your anger, we should be able to train ourselves so that we will avoid anger and instead show an aspect of joy. If we do this, if we remain smiling, if we remain happy, it means we have trained the mind. It means we are practicing patience, because if we cannot practice patience, then it means we will get angry. But here the whole point of mind training is to avoid anger, to avoid pride, and so forth, and instead have the space in our mind to develop love and compassion and so forth. So this is mind training. So during mind training, we have this instruction of transforming adverse conditions into the path, meaning what whatever bad things have to happen to us, we should be able to transform them into something that is really beneficial for our practice. So it is like this. We say if we meet with a difficult situation, if we become angry, what's the result of this? We become unhappy when we're angry. We make, when we show our anger or when we react with anger, we make the other person unhappy as well. We lose our appetite. We cannot enjoy our food. We cannot sleep, and so forth. And instead of becoming angry, just practice patience and meditate on compassion for that other person and say, this is what happens. Oh, they act in this way due to their own self-cherishing. So if we can remain positive in this situation, it's very good. And it shows that we're going down this path of eliminating the bad aspects of mind and encouraging everything that is positive. So it's very good when we start the day to begin with a determination and say, I will try everything I can not to become angry today, not to harm others today, and I will try to benefit others as much as possible. So let me try. Can I do this for one day? And of course, in the course of the day, we have periods that we meditate and periods that we are outside the meditation session. When we meditate, usually we are much more disciplined, but things we are challenged once we are out of the meditation. We have to go to work, we have to interact with others, we will meet with all sorts of people, all sorts of conditions. So it's very good to reinforce our intention and say that, especially at the crucial time where I'm not in my meditation, when I'm outside interacting, I will try not to harm others. I will try to benefit others as much as possible. So, setting up your motivation like this every day and intending to keep, I say, I will try. So, doing your best every day, this become parts of your mind training.
那都是推起那是吧？
All right. Thank
啥
you.
也不也，学也没多长。